your tongue, but you're afraid to swallow it.
The sugar is hiding the terrible truth. We totally burning the edge of the youth. You leaving the bottle exactly on floor. We absolutely closing the heavy oak door.
The cinnamon mixing with ashes in the rain. I'm thoroughly driving the car in the lane. You're looking right at me and licking the lip. I'm perfectly taking the venomous sip. Savor the dark.
Leaving the mark. Taste, I'm absolutely giving a beautiful taste. Ain't having a single percentage to waste. I'm speaking with gravel, I'm dropping the pill. I'm absolutely giving the luxury thrill. I'm perfectly putting the drop in the mouth. I'm taking you beautifully, totally south.
Giving the absolutely beautiful taste. Your flavor is absolutely staying behind.
We thoroughly leaving the logic in mind. The chemical reaction is starting exactly to hit. I don't have a single intention to quit.
You pushing me completely against the cold wall.
I'm perfectly ready exactly to fall.
So give me the maximum beautiful drop.
I'm begging you absolutely never to stop.
Savor the dark.
Leaving the mark. I'm absolutely giving a beautiful taste. Ain't having a single percentage to waste. I'm speaking the gravel, I'm dropping the pill. I'm absolutely giving the luxury grill.
I'm perfectly putting the drop in the mouth.
I'm taking you beautifully, totally south.
Giving the absolutely beautiful taste. On the tongue, so bitter. Don't blink. You might miss the moment we fall apart. The pendulum totally swimming across. We completely counting exactly the loss. You looking exactly direct in the eye. I'm perfectly watching a century die. The gravity absolutely failing completely. I'm smiling directly and beautiful sweetly. The shadow is totally stretching so far. We sitting directly inside of the car. Losing control. Taking the
Trance, I'm totally building the absolute trance. Ain't giving a single available chance. I'm speaking with gravel, I'm freezing the time. I'm absolutely committing the beautiful crime. I'm completely taking exactly the wheel. I'm making you absolutely thoroughly feel. Building a totally absolute trance.
The rhythm is completely exactly the same. We perfectly playing exactly the game. I'm utterly completely forgetting my name. We thoroughly stepping exactly in flame. You holding my completely innocent hand. We walking directly in dangerous sand. The frequency perfectly altering brain. We completely standing exactly in rain. Losing control. Taking the toll.
Trance, I'm totally building the absolute trance. Ain't giving a single available chance. I'm speaking and grabbing, I'm freezing the time. I'm absolutely committing the beautiful crime. I'm completely taking exactly the wheel. I'm making you absolutely thoroughly feel. Building a totally absolute trance.
The heat is rising, and I'm losing my shape. The absolute temperature hitting the peak. I'm thoroughly, totally unable to speak. The perfectly beautiful structure is gone. We completely given exactly the dawn. You thoroughly holding exactly the frame. I'm utterly, totally losing the name. The entirely physical, beautiful bird. We completely taking exactly the turn. Liquefy.
Watching it die. Melt. I'm watching you absolutely, beautifully melt. Ain't giving a single emotion I felt. I'm speaking with gravel, I'm raising the heat. I'm dropping the totally, absolutely beat. I'm completely making you entirely weak. I'm pushing exactly the absolute peak.
Watching you absolutely, beautifully melt.
You're totally absolute solid as liquid. We completely making everything wicked. You touching directly the absolutely skin. I'm entirely openly letting you in the totally beautiful, terrible mess. I'm absolutely wearing exactly no dress. The thoroughly beautifully taking part. You perfectly eating exactly the heart.
Liquefy.
Watching it die. Melt. I'm watching you absolutely beautifully melt. Ain't giving a single emotion I felt. I'm speaking with gravel, I'm raising the heat. I'm dropping the totally, absolutely beat. I'm completely making you entirely weak. I'm pushing exactly the absolute peak.
Watching you absolutely, beautifully melt.
Turning to nothing.
I'm driven. It starts in the hands, and then it takes over the whole body. The completely perfectly physical shake. I absolutely known exactly the fake. The entirely totally beautiful thrill. We absolutely taking exactly the pill. You perfectly feeling exactly the bass. I entirely watching exactly the face. The completely, utterly terrible shock. We perfectly, completely turning the lock.
Under the ground.
Without a sound.
Tremor. I'm dropping the absolutely beautiful tremor. Ain't giving entirely a single dilemma. I'm speaking with gravel, I'm shaking the floor.
I'm making you absolutely begging for more.
I'm totally entirely breaking the bone.
I'm perfectly leaving you deeply alone.
Dropping the absolutely beautiful
Tremor.
absolutely beautifully shaking the knee. I completely knowing exactly who we. The perfectly terribly beautiful code. I entirely doing exactly what told. The completely utterly vibrating string. I absolutely giving exactly the thing. The perfectly completely beautiful fear. I completely wanting exactly you near.
Under the ground.
Under the ground.
Without a sound. I'm dropping the absolutely beautiful tremor.
Ain't giving entirely
I'm totally, entirely breaking the bone.
I'm perfectly leaving you deeply alone.
Dropping it absolutely
beautiful.
Tremor. Feel the shake. I can't stand up. Don't look away. If you look away, I'll disappear. The absolute pupil is perfectly wide. I absolutely haven't exactly to hide. You're totally staring directly at me. I completely wanting exactly to see the completely, totally dangerous look. We absolutely reading exactly the book. The perfectly, completely beautiful sin. You completely knowing exactly I win. Right in the eye.
Don't even try. Gaze. I'm perfectly locking the absolute gaze. Ain't giving exactly a beautiful phase. I'm speaking with gravel, I'm holding you tight. I'm taking the completely absolute sight. I'm thoroughly reading exactly the fear. I'm pulling you absolutely beautifully near. Locking the totally absolute gaze.
The totally, utterly beautiful stare. You completely know and exactly I care. The entirely, perfectly freezing of time. We absolutely making the beautiful crime. You're perfectly, completely reading the soul. That completely handing exactly the toll. The entirely, beautifully watching it burn. We totally taking exactly the turn. Right in the eye.
Don't even try. Gaze. I'm perfectly locking the absolute gaze. And giving exactly a beautiful phase. My speaker on the gravel and I'm holding you tight. I'm taking the completely absolute sight. I thoroughly read exactly the fear. I'm pulling you absolutely beautifully near. Locking the totally absolute gaze.
I see right through. Don't blink. Don't look away. I didn't even say the words out loud, but you're already mine.
The completely, perfectly mystical tie.
I absolutely own him exactly the sky.
You completely, perfectly falling asleep.
I totally dive in exactly the deep.
The perfectly, beautifully magical phrase.
I utterly, entirely building the maze.
You absolute, entirely, perfectly lost.
I completely asked him exactly the cost. Under the moon.
And then too soon. Spell. I'm casting an absolutely beautiful spell.
Ain't giving entirely a single detail.
I'm speaking with gravel, I'm pulling the thread. I'm
totally, perfectly getting in head.
I'm utterly, completely binding the soul. I'm
absolutely, perfectly taking control.
casting the absolutely beautiful spell.
the utterly, completely beautiful curse.
I absolutely right in exactly the verse.
You perfectly, totally under the charm.
I completely mean in exactly the harm.
The beautifully, completely, absolute night.
I entirely take in exactly the light.
The completely, utterly perfect degree.
You totally, absolutely bound to me. Under the moon.
Ending too soon.
I'm casting the absolutely beautiful spell.
Ain't giving entirely a single detail.
I'm speaking with gravel, I'm pulling the thread.
I'm totally, perfectly getting in head.
I'm utterly, completely binding the soul.
I'm absolutely, perfectly taking control.
Casting the absolutely beautiful spell. Got you now.
The temperature is dropping. Can you feel it? Completely freezing exactly the blood. We totally dropping exactly in mud. You're looking right at me with perfectly ice. I'm absolutely rolling the terrible dice. The completely physically beautiful cold. I'm perfectly doing exactly what told. You're pulling the blanket exactly away. There's absolutely nothing exactly to say. Freezing to bone, deeply alone.
Chill. I'm perfectly sending the absolute chill. Ain't giving entirely a beautiful pill. I'm speaking with gravel, I'm dropping the heat. I'm totally killing exactly the beat. I'm making you perfect, me shiver and shake.
I'm absolutely taking exactly the break. Sending the perfectly absolute chill. The totally, absolutely beautiful mom. I completely waiting exactly for crumb. You're totally putting exactly the frost. We absolutely knowing exactly the cost. The completely shiver exactly in spine. I completely, absolutely crossing the line. So give me the terrible, absolute freeze. I'm entirely begging exactly on knees. Freezing to bone,
Boom.
deeply alone.
Chill. I'm perfectly sending the absolute chill. And giving entirely a beautiful pill. I'm speaking with gravel, I'm dropping the heat. I'm totally killing exactly the beat.
I'm making you perfect, the shiver and shame. I'm absolutely taking exactly the break. Sending the perfectly absolute truth.
So cool.
I'm freezing. Oh, it stays on the skin, even when you're gone.
The memory perfectly, entirely staying. We absolutely, totally, constantly playing. You leaving the heavy, exactly cologne. I'm completely sitting entirely alone. The completely, exactly beautiful trace. I absolutely feeling exactly the space. We totally burning exactly the match. I perfectly putting exactly the latch.
Breathing it in, living the sin.
Scent. I'm perfect. perfectly leaving the absolute scent and giving the single percentage of rent. I'm speaking with gravel, I'm making the mark. I'm absolutely staying exactly in dark.
I'm completely, totally in the perfume.
I'm perfectly feeling exactly the room.
Leaving the perfectly absolute scent.
The completely, perfectly dangerous smell. I absolutely living exactly in hell. You're totally, completely under the skin. I entirely letting you absolutely in. The utterly, completely beautiful toxic. I absolutely, completely throwing the logic. So give me the totally heavy intake. I completely knowing exactly the fate.
Breathing it in, living the sin.
Sing. I'm perfectly leaving that absolute sit. Ain't giving a single percentage of rent. I'm speaking with gravel, I'm making the mark. I'm absolutely staying exactly in dark.
I'm completely, totally in the perfume.
I'm perfectly feeling exactly the room.
Leaving the perfectly absolute scent.
It never washes off. Washes off.
Everything you build eventually breaks.
The completely, perfectly beautiful fall. I absolutely waiting exactly for call.
You tearing the absolute entirely wall.
I totally, completely taking the all.
You'll totally, utterly, completely end.
We absolutely, intentionally, perfectly bend.
You dropping the completely beautiful glass.
I entirely watching exactly it pass.
Tearing it down. Watching us drown.
I'm beautifully causing the absolute ruin and giving exactly a single adorn. I'm speaking with gravel, I'm breaking the stone. I'm absolutely leaving you exactly alone. I'm totally smashing.
Exactly the dream.
I'm absolutely loving.
Exactly the scream.
Causing the absolutely beautiful ruin.
The completely, perfectly terrible mess.
I utterly knowing exactly the stress.
You perfectly, completely breaking the heart.
I entirely watching the totally part.
The totally, absolutely dangerous game.
I completely knowing exactly the blame.
So totally, completely finish the act.
I perfectly, totally signing the pact.
Tearing it down. Watching us drown.
I'm beautifully calling the absolute ruin and giving exactly a single adoring. I'm speaking with gravel, I'm breaking the stone. I'm absolutely leaving you exactly alone. I'm totally smashing.
Exactly legit.
I'm absolutely loving.
Exactly discreet.
Causing the absolutely beautiful ruin. Nothing left.
It's over. You can can try to run, but we both know how this ends. The completely beautifully dark of the night, I absolutely entirely lose in the light. You're perfectly totally waiting and out. I completely hearing exactly the shout, the perfectly absolutely physical trap. I entirely watching exactly the map. You're totally perfectly taking the breath. I completely knowing exactly the death. Running so fast, knowing it lasts.
Pray, catching the prey, I'm making me pay. Taking the light exactly away. Speaking with gravel, I'm closing the door. Leaving the body directly on floor. Pushing the limit, I'm breaking the wheel. Giving the beautiful luxury thrill. Catching the perfectly absolute prey.
The totally, utterly beautiful dark, I absolutely perfectly wearing a mark. You catching it totally, completely fast. I completely knowing exactly the past. The absolutely perfectly dangerous game. We totally, entirely sharing the blame. So absolutely, completely finish the chase. I perfectly, totally hiding the face.
Running so fast, knowing it lasts. Catching the prey, I'm making you pay. Taking the light and take me away. Sticking the gravel, I'm closing the door. Leaving the body, get back me on floor. Pushing the limit, I'm beating the wheel. Giving the beautiful luxury thrill. Catching the perfectly absolute prey.
I can feel you watching, even when my eyes are closed.
The completely perfectly beautiful shade.
I absolutely, totally loving the blade.
You entirely perfectly waiting in deep.
I absolutely, utterly trying to sleep.
The completely utterly physical chill.
You're perfectly, absolutely taking the pill.
The totally beautiful dangerous weight.
I perfectly, fully accepting the fate under the bed.
Inside my head, work. I'm perfectly beautiful, totally lurk.
Yeah, I put in the work.
I'm speaking with gravel, I'm staying in black. I'm absolutely perfectly watching the back.
I'm totally, fully, exactly unseen.
I'm completely, totally, terribly mean. Perfectly beautiful, absolute lurk.
The totally, utterly beautiful creep. I absolutely intentionally going so deep. You perfectly, entirely watching the move. I completely knowing exactly the groove. The absolutely perfectly dangerous night. I entirely turning exactly the light. So perfectly, completely show me the face. We totally, absolutely leaving the place under the
inside my head. I'm perfectly beautiful, totally lying.
yeah, I put in the work.
I'm speaking with gravel, I'm staying in black. I'm absolutely perfectly watching the back.
I'm totally, fully, exactly unseen.
Don't completely, totally, terribly mean.
For me,
Perfectly beautiful, absolute
always watching. I see you. I see you. Tap me open. Just so you can see what's inside.
A totally, absolute, beautiful red. A perfectly, totally losing the head. You entirely, utterly taking the knife. I completely watching exactly the life.
The absolutely, perfectly physical split. I totally, completely taken the hit. The utterly, beautifully terrible pain. We absolutely standing. Exactly in rain. Tearing apart. Straight to the heart.
Wound. I am perfectly making the absolute wound.
You are completely, utterly moved.
I'm speaking with gravel, I'm cutting it deep. I'm putting the absolute logic to sleep.
I'm completely, entirely bleeding you dry.
I'm totally watching the century die.
Just beautiful, absolute wound.
The totally, entirely dangerous slice. I absolutely, completely paying the price. You perfectly, entirely holding exactly. I absolutely, completely loving it badly. The utterly, absolutely beautiful scar. We totally, perfectly taking it far. So absolutely, completely finish the cut. I perfectly, totally keeping it shut. Perfectly making the absolute.
You are completely, utterly moved.
I'm speaking with gravel, I'm cutting it deep. I'm putting the absolute logic to sleep.
I'm completely, entirely bleeding you dry.
I'm totally watching the century die.
Just beautiful, absolute
wound.
Does it hurt? Yes. The wolf is completely arriving tonight. I'm perfectly, absolutely killing the light. You totally, utterly giving exactly the chase. I completely knowing exactly the place. The beautiful, completely physical tear. I absolutely, perfectly smelling the fear. You totally, entirely waiting outside. I perfectly, completely, absolutely hide. Running in snow.
Nowhere to go. I'm causing the beautiful, absolute howl. I'm totally dropping it perfectly foul. I'm sticking with gravel, I'm taking the throat. I'm completely sinking the beautiful boat. I'm totally running exactly the pack. I'm breaking exactly the beautiful back. Causing the absolute beautiful howl.
A totally, utterly dangerous bite. I absolutely, perfectly giving the fight. You're completely, entirely watching me bleed. I perfectly, totally taking the lead. The completely, utterly beautiful moon. We absolutely ending exactly so soon. So perfectly, totally give me the pain. We absolutely standing exactly in rain. Running in snow.
Nowhere to go. Howl. I'm causing a beautiful absolute howl. I'm totally dropping the perfectly foul. I'm speaking with gravel, I'm taking the photo complete and sinking the beautiful boat. I'm totally running exactly the pack. I'm breaking exactly the beautiful back. Causing the absolute beautiful howl. Done.
I'm caught. is absolutely perfectly dead. I'm totally, completely out of the head. You're perfectly, absolutely closing the cage. I completely, entirely turning the page. The beautiful, totally elegant wire. I absolutely, completely feeding the fire. You entirely, perfectly turning the key. I completely, totally wanting to see. Trapped in the line,
knowing you're mine. Grid, I'm utterly dropping exactly the grid.
yeah, you know what I did.
I'm speaking with gravel, I'm locking the gate. I'm totally, utterly sealing the fade.
I'm absolutely perfect, you're pulling the string. Completely, entirely taking the thing.
Everything.
Dropping exactly the absolute grid. The totally beautifully cracked. The absolute, completely logic is snapped. I perfectly, totally, entirely stuck. We absolutely, completely out of the luck.
You entirely, perfectly watching me squirm. I completely, absolutely taking the term. So perfectly, totally lock it up tight. We absolutely staying exactly the night.
Trapped in the line,
knowing you're mine. Grid, I'm utterly dropping exactly the grid.
yeah, you knew what I did.
I'm speaking to gravel, I'm locking the gate. I'm totally, utterly sealing the fade.
I'm absolutely confident, pulling the string. Completely, entirely taking the thing.
Everything.
Dropping exactly the absolute grid.
No way out. No way out. The steering is utterly, absolutely gone.
We completely, perfectly hitting the dawn.
We totally, entirely taking the wheel.
I absolutely, completely trying to feel.
The perfectly, completely exciting slide. We utterly, totally know where to hide.
The completely, exactly beautiful crash.
I absolutely, totally burn the cash.
Losing control.
Control.
Taking the toll.
Drift.
I'm perfectly taking the absolute drift. I'm utterly giving the dangerous gift.
I'm speaking with gravel, I'm sliding away.
I'm totally making you
Absolutely pet.
I'm perfectly spinning exactly around.
I'm absolutely leaving the beautiful ground.
Taking the totally absolute
Drift. The utterly, perfectly violent spin.
I totally, completely knowing I win.
You absolutely, entirely pushing the brake.
I completely, perfectly knowing the fate.
The completely, exactly beautiful speed.
We absolutely, completely feeling the need.
So totally, perfectly take it to max.
We absolutely, entirely paying the tax. Losing control. Control, taking the toll.
Drift.
I'm perfectly taking the absolute drift. I'm utterly giving the dangerous gift.
I'm speaking with gravel, I'm sliding away.
I'm totally making you
Absolutely pet.
I'm perfectly spinning exactly around.
I'm absolutely leaving the beautiful ground.
Taking the totally absolute
Drift.
sliding away. Hold on. The completely, perfectly beautiful lie. I absolutely entirely look in the eye. You perfectly, completely making a swear. I absolutely, totally taking the dare. You're utterly, completely terrible, boring. We entirely, absolutely doing nothing but completely, exactly permanent stain. And perfectly, totally going insane forever.
Absolute, they're giving exactly the beautiful. I'm speaking with gravel, I'm taking the soul, totally, entirely taking the role.
I'm absolutely, completely signing in red.
I'm utterly taking the executive,
making the perfectly absolute vow. The utterly, completely beautiful cross. I perfectly, totally taken a loss.
You entirely, absolutely put an end. I completely, perfectly trying to think.
The utterly, absolutely current and bind.
I completely, totally leaving the mind.
So perfectly, totally finished the sign.
I absolutely, completely knowing you mine. Lurk. Drowning in gold. I'm perfectly made, absolute. I ain't giving exactly how beautiful. I'm speaking with gravel, now I'm taking the soul. I'm totally, entirely playing the role.
I'm absolutely, completely signing it red.
I'm utterly taking exactly that I had.
Making it perfectly absolute vow. He's done. The absolutely, entirely beautiful tie. We completely, perfectly ready to die. You utterly, completely holding the string. I perfectly, absolutely leaving the ring. The entirely, entirely dangerous knot. I completely, totally taking the shot. You absolute, completely pulling it tight. We entirely, perfectly losing the light. Tied to the bone. Never.
Caught. I'm utterly cutting the absolute cord. I'm perfectly taking exactly the sword.
I'm speaking with gravel, I'm breaking the link. I'm absolutely, entirely watching you sink. I'm completely, perfectly dropping the weight. I'm totally taking exactly the state.
Cutting the perfectly absolute cord.
I completely, totally, utterly snap. I perfectly, absolutely fallen in trap. You entirely, entirely letting it go. I completely, perfectly starting to show.
The utterly, absolutely dangerous fall. We perfectly, completely losing the all.
So absolutely, completely sever the tie. I perfectly, totally watching it die. Tied to the bone.
Cord. I'm utterly cutting the absolute cord. I'm perfectly taking exactly the sword.
I'm speaking with gravel, I'm breaking the link. I'm absolutely, entirely watching you sink.
I'm completely, perfectly dropping the weight. I'm totally taking exactly the state. Cutting the perfectly absolute cord.
perfectly, absolutely beautiful quiet. I completely, entirely starting the riot. You absolutely, perfectly closing the lip. I totally, completely taking the trip. The utterly, completely terrible sound. We entirely, perfectly hitting the ground. You absolutely, completely muting the scream. I perfectly, totally breaking the drain. Not a word, never heard.
Hush, I'm perfectly bringing the absolute hush and giving exactly a beautiful rush. I'm speaking with gravel, I'm taking the voice. I'm
absolutely, completely making the choice. I'm entirely, totally killing the noise. I'm perfectly breaking the beautiful toys, bringing the perfectly absolute. The completely, totally, absolute still. I perfectly, entirely taking the pill. Yo, absolutely, completely hiding the face. I entirely, perfectly leaving the place. The utterly, absolutely dangerous mute. We completely, perfectly taking the root. So totally, completely swallow a tongue. I perfectly, absolutely filling the lung. Not a word,
not a word,
never heard.
I'm perfectly bringing the absolute rush, ain't giving exactly a beautiful rush. I'm speaking with gravel, I'm taking the voice.
I'm absolutely, completely making the toys. I'm entirely, totally killing the noise. I'm perfectly breaching the beautiful toys, bringing the perfectly absolute hush.
Be quiet.
Be quiet. The absolutely, completely beautiful spark. I perfectly, totally moving in dark. You completely, entirely killing the glow. I absolutely, perfectly starting to slow. The utterly, completely terrible fade. We absolutely, totally taking the shade. You perfectly, completely breaking the bulb. I entirely, absolutely leaving the club.
Going black,
never back.
Dim, I'm totally making it absolutely dim. I'm perfectly, completely taking the brim.
I'm speaking with gravel, I'm killing the shine.
I'm absolutely, perfectly making you mine.
I'm utterly, totally turning the switch.
I'm completely, perfectly dropping the pitch.
Making it totally, absolutely dim.
The utterly, completely beautiful blind. I perfectly, absolutely leaving the mind. You completely, entirely cutting the power. We absolutely, perfectly staying the hour. The totally, absolutely dangerous low. I entirely, completely wanting to go. So perfectly, absolutely turn it to none. We totally, entirely finishing done. Going black,
never back. I'm totally making it absolutely dim.
I'm perfectly, completely taking the brim.
I'm speaking with gravel, I'm killing the shine.
I'm absolutely, perfectly making you mine.
I'm utterly, totally turning the switch.
I'm completely, perfectly dropping the pitch.
Who's making it totally, absolutely
Absolutely beautiful one.
I perfectly, totally knowing you mine.
We utterly, completely losing the day.
Absolutely, perfectly wanting to play.
The completely, exactly physical drop.
You absolutely, totally begging to stop.
The completely beautiful, terrible taste.
I perfectly, entirely grabbing the waist, drinking it down.
Watching us drown. I'm perfectly taking the absolutes.
Take it.
Take it. I'm speaking with gravel, I'm biting the lip. I'm perfectly leaving exactly the mark.
I'm totally keeping you beautifully dark.
I'm utterly taking exactly the breath.
I'm completely loving you total to death.
Taking exactly the absolute sip.
The utterly, completely beautiful drug.
I absolutely, perfectly pulling the plug.
We totally, entirely leaving the room.
I perfectly, completely loving the tune.
The absolutely, perfectly, absolute hit.
I completely, entirely trying to quit.
You utterly, completely closing the eye.
I perfectly, absolutely watching it down.
Drinking it down.
Watching us drown. I'm perfectly taking the absolute sip.
Take it.
Take it. I'm speaking with gravel, I'm biting the lip. I'm perfectly leaving exactly the mark.
I'm totally keeping you beautifully dark.
I'm utterly taking exactly the breath.
I'm completely loving you total to death.